Today, we will talk about how problems are resolved quickly in a country where official rules are not always sufficient. We are talking about a system in which people wearing suits can freely walk into banks, sit at the same table with major company executives and politicians to make decisions, yet whose names rarely appear in official documents. In this video, you will see how a structure that emerged on the margins of society centuries ago in Japan gradually positioned itself at the most sensitive points of the economy and, while remaining in the shadows, came to influence the system itself. If you think that power is always visible, this video will prove you wrong. For many years, the Yakuza system that dominated Japan was fundamentally different from the hidden criminal activities we are accustomed to. Instead of hiding in the shadows, criminals wore formal suits and entered banks through the main entrances without restriction. They were not only involved in illegal activities, but also sat at the same table with influential CEOs and politicians, deciding the fate of billions of dollars. This scene, reminiscent of a movie script, was in fact a real system in which criminal elements had penetrated the highest levels of society. Because many people learn about the Yakuza from movies, they associate them only with tattooed bodies, severed fingers, and violence. However, these images are merely an external appearance. The real Yakuza had a far more restrained, disciplined, and intellectual structure. They were not just street-level criminals, but serious economic actors who had infiltrated the economic system, manipulating and directing financial processes. This situation mentioned in the source is not limited to Japan alone. Rather, it reveals a broader truth: the consequences of crime, finance, and politics becoming excessively intertwined. When these three elements intersect, the concept of law loses its absoluteness and becomes flexible, and as a result, the real boundaries between legal and illegal disappear, remaining only formally on paper. The historical roots of the Yakuza go back centuries, to the 17th century, during a period of rigid social stratification in Japan. At that time, society was divided into strict classes: privileged samurai, hardworking peasants, artisans, and merchants. However, there were also certain groups that fell outside the boundaries of this rigid hierarchical system and were not accepted by society. It was precisely these socially isolated groups, gamblers who survived on chance earnings, traveling street vendors, the unemployed, and masterless former samurai, ronin, who formed the first core of the Yakuza. These people, left outside the system, came together and laid the foundation for what would eventually become one of Japan's most organized structures. The emergence of Yakuza groups was not based on grand ambitions, but on simple needs such as providing security, financial support, and a sense of belonging to people marginalized by society. They effectively operated in areas abandoned by the state, providing funds to those who could not obtain loans and restoring justice for those who were treated unfairly. Although the methods they employed were based on fear, they were quite effective in achieving their goals and delivering concrete results. Over time, these small groups expanded their areas of operation and evolved from mere street criminals into organized forces that controlled gambling houses, loan sharking networks, and strategic smuggling routes. They were no longer random groups acting chaotically, but disciplined powers laying the foundation of a parallel economy that functioned unofficially yet systematically within the country. The real turning point of this organization came in the period following World War II. Due to the destruction brought by the war, Japan had been almost completely devastated economically and socially. Cities were reduced to rubble, industrial capacity was destroyed, and millions of people faced mass starvation. In this environment of chaos, where state institutions were weakened and the law failed to function, the resulting vacuum was quickly filled by the black market. The primary force behind these black markets was the Yakuza. They established vast logistics networks by secretly supplying society's most essential needs: food, fuel, medicine, and foreign goods. The Yakuza were not only involved in sourcing and distributing goods, but also allocated financial resources and managed debt collection processes. In a situation where the state could not provide services for many ordinary citizens, establishing contact with the Yakuza was not considered committing a crime, but simply a means of physical survival. Thus, taking advantage of the absence of the state, the Yakuza gained a decisive and unshakable position in society. When Japan embarked on its path of economic development, many expected Yakuza groups to be completely eliminated, but this did not happen. On the contrary, the Yakuza adapted flexibly to changing conditions and continued their activities. They reduced overt violence, adopted corporate attire, suits, opened formal offices, and hired secretaries. A corporate structure was formed within the criminal world. The organizational structures of major syndicates, such as Yamaguchi-gumi and Sumiyoshi-kai, were almost indistinguishable from standard corporate models. Yakuza groups expanded their influence by entering strategic sectors such as construction, real estate, and the entertainment industry. In the business world, they were known as a force that could resolve companies' difficult knots. Whether silencing protesting workers, disciplining partners who failed to repay debts, or removing residents who refused to vacate land, the Yakuza handled all these complex matters through swift and discreet methods. Although these services were illegal, they were fast, and speed was capitalism's favorite asset. During the 1960s and 1970s, the Yakuza became one of the central figures of the Japanese economy. They acquired land, manipulated prices by instilling fear among people, and generated millions of dollars in revenue through these means. To launder money obtained from criminal activities, they created shell companies and penetrated international markets. Although these activities were no secret and known to everyone, no one broke the silence because various layers of society benefited financially from this system. Banks did not interfere with the profit-driven relationships between politicians, corporations, and the Yakuza. The reason for this lay in the smooth execution of loan repayments and the perceived absence of risk. Consequently, where there was no perceived risk, questions of transparency did not arise. In the 1980s, the Japanese economy experienced its golden age, the peak of the economic bubble. During this period, land prices rose so rapidly that they reached levels disconnected from reality. It was even claimed that the land occupied by the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was worth more than the entire state of California. The banking sector's generous credit policies and society's belief in endless profit created an ideal environment for Yakuza members, who were influential figures in the criminal world. Yakuza groups penetrated the stock market by acquiring company shares and blackmailing management, becoming part of the economy through the Sakaya system, which generated unofficial payments not recorded in formal accounts. After the economic bubble burst in 1989 and Japan entered the era of the lost decades, many companies went bankrupt and banks weakened. However, the Yakuza turned this crisis into an opportunity, using fear-based methods to clean the market by collecting debts and seizing properties. Although anti-Yakuza laws enacted in the 1990s and pressure placed on banks reduced the number of group members, this did not mark the end of their activities, only a change in form. Closing their offices, these groups transitioned into a more invisible structure through shell companies, intermediaries, and offshore accounts, expanding their sphere of influence from Macau casinos to real estate markets in Hawaii and throughout Southeast Asia, ultimately becoming a global power. Crime and capitalism are two faces of the same system. When the official system slows down, crime offers speed. When laws become obstacles, it offers solutions. The Yakuza simply demonstrated this openly. In the modern era, the presence of shadows is still felt. Only their names and methods have changed. Nevertheless, the fundamental logic remains constant. Where there is wealth, there is power, and where there is power, hidden influences, shadows, prevail. History teaches us that the most terrifying empires are not always built with armies and weapons. On the contrary, sometimes these empires rise upon the foundations of financial statements, official contracts, and silent agreements. Thank you for watching us. If this topic was interesting to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. In the upcoming videos on this channel, we will take a deeper look at history, economics, and the major processes shaping the world. Your opinions are important to us as well. Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, those who understand the past build the future more correctly.